Welcome to Words on Air. I'm Lindsay Smith. Today on our show, Anna Badkhen. Anna is the author of 6 books of creative nonfiction, most recently, Fisherman's Blues, a West African community at sea. Also joining us, Sarah Beth Childers. Sarah Beth is on the creative writing faculty at Oklahoma State University, specializing in creative nonfiction. Sarah Beth is the author of Shake Terribly the Earth, Stories from an Appalachian Family.
What drew you to the fishing community in Senegal in the first place? Why fishermen and why that particular place?
I had worked in Mali. I was herding cattle with a family of nomadic Fulani cowboys. And Mali is a semi-desert, so it's semi-drylands, arid scrublands. I saw fishermen poling across the Niger River in these beautiful pirogues, and I thought, what would it be to be on one of those pirogues? But also broader. I have always been interested in borders, physical and metaphysical borders. Frontiers that we create, personal boundaries, geopolitical borders. I was a war correspondent for 15 years, so I wanted to write a book about boundaries, and I thought, what better boundary than the frontier between the terra firma and the unfathomable, the ineffable, the sea. So this ecotone attracted me, and also I'd never worked on the sea, so that was very interesting.
Another kind of boundary that you break down and that I found really interesting in your book is the boundary between like history and legend. And you'll often tell like historical details about the people in this community and about the land, along with legend, like kind of with the same narrative authority, just kind of blending the two, and you'll just break into one or the other. There was this lovely passage about cooking and legend that begins on page 113. I wondered if you could read that for us. And then if you could talk a little bit about why you have that blending of history and legend.
Let's start with the talking.
Okay.
I'm not sure we have the wisdom to separate one from the other. And mythologies are created upon a foundation of some kind. So we don't know exactly where mythology ends, where legend ends, and history begins. Also, Eurocentric concept of history as a written thing is very damaging to our global culture, because it annihilates the notion that cultures that are unlettered have history. And that's a very dangerous premise. This is how fundamental inequality is created in the world. This is how colonies are created in the world. This is where slavery comes from. The idea that if you don't have volumes, created meticulously by monks over centuries, then you don't have history. But a lot of cultures have history that's oral, that's just as valid, but because of our Eurocentric thinking about science and what history is, we discard that as unhistory. But what are we, and what makes us human is stories that we are raised with, and these stories can be written or they can be orally exchanged. It was a woman's cooking that tricked Njajanjai into becoming the first ruler of the Wolof. After the death of his father, the Almoravid chieftain Abu Bakr ibn Umar ibn Ibrahim ibn Turgut, who had come south from the Sahara and settled at the headwaters of the Senegal River in the 11th century, Njajanjai's widowed mother, the Fulani princess Fatoumata Sall, followed her late husband's will and married their servant. Prissy and indignant at his mother's remarriage, Jejanjai threw himself into the river and remained stubbornly afloat for 7 years until he overheard a group of child fishers quarreling over their catch and stepped in. Hearing of Jejanjai's wise counsel, local adults caught him with fish nets, hauled him ashore, and begged him, this African Perseus, to become their ruler. Reluctant to put down roots, Jejanjai decided to outwit the villagers by feigning muteness, until an astute young woman came out with a cooking pot and 2 stones, set up this lopsided kitchen in front of the prisoner, and pretended to try to cook. The bipod did not work, of course, it was not supposed to. The pot kept slipping off into the fire. Jejanjai watched until at last his patience grew so thin he could no longer hold his tongue. "Wallahi, woman, use 3 stones," he said, and realizing he had spoken, gave up and agreed to become the village king, the first king of the Jolof in the land of the Wolof. And it remains so. Water transports and converts. Women hoodwink men into settling down by feigning weakness. When women work, men sit around and give advice unbidden, and since even settled men are rarely home long enough, it falls to women to tend to domestic magic.
Thank you. Another thing I was wondering about, teaching creative nonfiction at OSU, I talk a lot about how literary nonfiction writers construct their personas within particular essays and particular books, like what parts of themselves they have to put in so the readers can know who's telling the story. So I was wondering, what parts of yourself did you feel were particularly crucial to include? Since it's not really about you, but kind of just like you as the person who tells the story.
This is a hard one. I think there is a boundary between oversharing, which is definitely a trend, the no boundary, and withholding. I don't believe in objective anything. I don't believe that a writer can be objective. So when I'm telling a story of something I witnessed, I have to say, and this is who I am, and these are the lenses that you're learning this history through, because I'm in this particular mood, or this is my background. So therefore, this is why I'm paying attention to certain things as opposed to other things. And the reader, in this way, knows that there is an honesty, that I'm explaining. I have a book, the previous book, which is set in Mali, I was writing when I was brokenhearted. And it's a very sad book. And a lot of it is about brokenheartedness, because that's what stood out to me during that journey, the sorrow and the grief. And I couldn't write that book without saying, this is what's happening to me as I'm walking with my fellow cowboys, because you have to know that I'm grieving. And so everything I see is me seeing it and telling you through the prism of my grief.
Makes a lot of sense. I felt in this particular book that often it felt really crucial that you were a mother. Well, you didn't overshare about that at all. Just occasionally you'll just bring it in these moments where it feels really appropriate, and where I feel like it does help us understand who you are and what you're feeling in that moment. And one example was on page 143, where you talk about your own son after this really heartbreaking passage about a woman named Marie who's just lost a son to drowning. I was wondering if you could read that for us or talk about it.
I've never not been a mother. I became a mother very young. So there's also a little bit of a discomfort that I encounter talking about my child, because he's not a child, he's an adult. So, he has his own life, and I'm careful about his privacy. But of course, he's part of my life. So, so this is a young man, my son's age, a little bit older than my son, who was a fisherman who drowned at sea. And this happens very often, not just in Senegal. Fishermen drown. And I pay a condolence visit to his mother, Badkhen, who is my neighbor. She sits on the edge of that purple bed and talks fast. I remember you. You were on that purse seiner with your notebook writing something, and I called out to you, "How are you?" And you said, "I am well," remember? I thought it was funny to see a woman on a pirogue. And now you're here in my house. Thank you for coming. Thank you, thank you. Here, let me show you his photo. Where is his photo? Where is his photo? Women swarm into this cube of grief, look for the photo. It was just here. Are you sitting on it? No, it's someone else's room. Here it is. Here, look. This is my boy. A laminated enlarged printout of him standing with his girlfriend, who now will be raising alone their 6-month-old child. She is statuesque and beige brocade. He is in a black T-shirt emblazoned with a gangster logo in silver Gothic letters, copper protection bangles, a Chicago Bulls cap, red Converse lace-up. Swag. One out of the scented purple dark, Marie smiles at me. He's handsome, isn't he? I return to my room to make a call to Ohio, to my own son, who is 2 years younger than Action and very far from the sea. A day's allocation of sand has seeped out of the wall onto my sleeping mat, and upon it waits a pale butterfly.
That pale butterfly somehow was just so beautiful and heartbreaking at the end of that passage. It just really struck me. And then thinking about that passage, I'm also thinking about just your lovely portraits of people just throughout the book. I feel like I've found the book really valuable for that reason and understanding these people. And I wondered if you could maybe select one or two of the people that you talk about in your book and tell me about, I guess maybe one of them, and tell me about what you really wanted to get across about that person. What did you wanted us to see?
Well, this is a book about my friends. So people in this book are people with whom I shared everything for almost a year. I went fishing 20 miles offshore without lifesavers with some of these guys. So, we faced death together. We went through a lot of stuff together. I helped build someone's fishing pirogue. I shared meals. I lived in a house full of children whom I helped bathe. I mean, this was my life. So I think I'm just telling stories of people I love. The main character of the book is a fishing captain named Ndongo Soare. He's a little younger than I am. I like him a lot. He has a very powerful mother, she's a formidable lady. She's very intimidating, can be very intimidating, and sometimes a little bit scary even, but lovely. And he has 3 wives he has to take care of. He has 12 living children he has to take care of, now 13. He has money problems, of course, because he has to support such a large family. He has a father who is tyrannical and physically violent occasionally. Despite the fact that Ndongo is a grown man, he has to live with a man who, will throw a punch at him occasionally. He has to figure out how to raise a future generation, a next generation of fishermen. He has to figure out how to live at the mercy of an ocean that is being systemically depleted by overfishing, mostly done by foreign trawlers. His sea is also changing because of climate change that we make happen here in the global north. So, Ndongo is a good friend of mine, and I wanted to tell a story of what it's like to be Ndongo. He's lovely. We had so much fun and we had so much sorrow together. And I went with a sick doctor to a doctor when she fell ill. I was there right after his third wife delivered his latest baby. You know, it's a life. I was a friend. I am a friend.
Yeah.
And we're in contact. So I'll see him this spring. Inshallah, I'll visit him.
Yeah, that love and respect really comes through in the book, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Big thank you to our guests, Anna Badkhen and Sarah Beth Childers, and thank you for watching Words on Air. We'll see you next time.